What's up everyone, Danny Lightning back with another video. So today we're checking out the Brainworx BXN console channel strip. This thing was designed by Rupert Neve and it gives you that highly sought after Neve sound. If you're going to buy this plugin, I would highly suggest waiting for it to go on sale. I think on sale you can often get this for about 40 bucks. And Brainworx does have sales a lot. I would go over there and check weekly to see if you can find this on sale for $40 because it's totally worth the 40 bucks. You're currently hearing what my voice sounds like with this turned on, so let me go ahead and turn it off in 3, 2, 1. And now we have the plugin turned off. We don't have anything going on. So this is how different my voice sounds without the plugin. And if you're listening on a really good set of headphones, you're probably going to hear some pretty major differences. All right, so the very first section up here, these top two knobs on the left, that's your high pass filter and your low pass filter. So the high pass is at 18 kilohertz. If you want to turn that off, you just click this little button and the light turns off. And this is your low pass filter, which I usually put around 50 or 60 hertz, right? 50 or 60 hertz cuts off the unwanted bass frequencies that are deeper than the human voice. That way you don't get any room rumbles or anything coming back into your microphone. So I would highly suggest putting that right around 60 hertz. So I just leave the low pass filter on the stock setting and I put the high pass filter on 60 hertz, and that is pretty much perfect. After you get those two knobs adjusted, now we're going to go over to the in-gain knob. This is going to be like our overall volume control. You can turn your recording up or down. If your mic's not loud enough, you can turn yourself up or you can turn yourself down with this. For now, I'm just going to leave it on 0, but make sure you get that where you want it before you adjust the compressor or the noise gate. So adjust that first, and then we're going to move on to the noise gate and the expander and compressor section. This row from top to bottom here is going to be your noise gate. And this row here from top to bottom is going to be your compressor. It's a little bit of a weird and confusing layout in my opinion, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually pretty easy. Let's go ahead and set up the noise gate first. So what I like to do is I put the HVST setting to about 5.0. What you're going to want to do is watch this little bar here. When I stop talking, see that green bar that goes up and down where my mouse is spinning around? When I stop talking, what I like to do is just move this until that stays solid when I stop talking. So for me, right around 40 decibels is where I put that. And then the next dial, I put that on about 30. So that means every time you stop talking, it's going to lower all the background noise by about 30 decibels. So you can barely hear the background noise when you stop talking. And the release, I just leave that on 0.30, which is, I believe, 300 milliseconds. And the little gate button down here is lit up. So if you hit that, that's going to turn the noise gate off. And when that's lit up, it's going to turn the noise gate on. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and set up the compressor. So the first thing is the gain dial. I leave this alone for now. You might want to adjust that later, but for right now, just leave that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to move this threshold until I see this little red bar going up and down right here where it says LC. Watch this dial where my mouse is spinning around. So I'm just going to move this up until I see it starting to jump a little bit. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, so right now we got a little bit of compression going on. So check 1, 2, 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 1, 2. And if you're doing a speaking voice, you only want to have a little bit of compression. So we don't really want to see it go up more than like 2 or 3 of those notches, more like 1 or 2 like you're seeing right now until you get a little bit louder, and then it's going to, you know, do its thing and compress you a little bit more. But you just want to see that kind of kicking on just a little bit just to knock down the peaks. And then when you get loud, it turns you down so you're not breaking out somebody's ears. So the next dial here, I always put that onto a 2 to 0 to 1, or you could do a 3 to 0 to 1 if you want it. 3 to 1 compression starts to get a little bit more aggressive, so I stay with the 2 to 1. That's more of a natural compression. So I always put this knob on 2, 0, 1, and that will give me a 2 to 1 compression ratio, which is almost perfect. And then I come down here, and this is my release. I put that on 0.10. So now we got the noise gate set up, so every time I stop talking, you should hear dead silence. And now we have the compressor set up, so every time I get a little bit loud, it's going to turn me down. We do not want too much compression, and you don't want to overdo the noise gate, because if you overdo the noise gate, that is no good. It'll start cutting your voice on and off. So you gotta be very, very careful when running an expander or a noise gate. Now we're going to go ahead and move over to the EQ section. So the first one, I always put that around 15 kilohertz. So that's 15,000 hertz. And I boost that usually by 1 or 2 decibels. And that's going to just bring out those air frequencies a little bit. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Everybody's voice is going to be EQ'd differently. So this is just kind of a rundown of how I do it, just to show you how the EQ works. You need to EQ according to your voice, not mine, but this is just a good idea to show you how the EQ works. All right. So the next knob down here, this blue set, is going to be your high mids. I usually put that around 4,000. I usually leave that Q on 2, and then I boost that by about 1.5 decibels. Next, we come down here. These are your low mids. Right now, I got this on 1,500 hertz. I leave the Q on 2.0. and I boost that by about 1 decibel. And then I come down here, this is the bass frequencies. I would set that around, 90 or 100, and I usually boost that by about 1 decibel. And this little button here is going to turn your EQ on and off. So basically these top 2 knobs right here are your highs. These 3 here with the blue mark, those are your mid-range, your high mids. These gray ones are your low mids, and then these bottom 2 are the lows. Next, we have something called V-gain. Personally, I don't think you're going to be able to hear a difference, but this introduces some noise into the recording to kind of give it that old school analog sound, and I cannot hear a difference whether or not this is on or off. The user manual says leave this on 85 to get the best results. But if you don't want any of that noise, you can always turn that all the way to off, right? You can turn that off so there's no noise if you want, but the user manual does say leave that on around like 85 to get the best results. Next here we have the left and right button. This is kind of an interesting thing. This is supposed to make it sound more like an analog console where the left and the right channels are slightly different. On old school analog consoles, the left and the right channel were never completely identical, so you can actually click this until you hear the sound that you want. Each one of these combinations will sound very slightly different. If you want to turn this off, just find the stereo mode button here, click that off, and then you're going to have 2 identical channels that sound exactly the same. But if you turn that on, you can just kind of find the 2 channels that sound best to you, and that gives you that old school analog sound. I just usually leave it on 1 and 2. If you want, turn it off. It's up to you. Now, the next thing we have is how much saturation we get. So right here, there's this little dial that says THD. It's on -60 to start off. If you turn it this way, that's going to turn down the saturation. If you turn it up, that's going to give you more saturation. And that's what gives you that old school kind of like tube-ish preamp sound that you're getting. That kind of gives you that really awesome Neve preamp sound. So, if you want 100% clean, turn that off. If you want that Neve sound, I would say leave it on -60 decibels and get a little bit of that sought-after harmonic distortion. Most audio interface preamps are very, very clean sounding, almost to the point where it's boring. And that's why a lot of people will use a preamp like this with a little bit of harmonic distortion or saturation to kind of color and dirty up the sound a little bit to give it a little bit of flavor so it doesn't sound quite so boring. A really, really clean preamp can sound kind of sterile sometimes. Now, most of these other controls, I don't suggest touching those. Just leave them alone. You do have the big red mute button here. If you push that, it's going to mute everything. And then you have another volume slider here. So this is like the overall final volume. So the in-gain knob would be the very first thing you adjust before you start adjusting your compression and your noise gate. But I normally just leave that on 0. And then when I'm done with this, I add a limiter, and I use the limiter to push myself up to the correct volume. So personally, I don't use any of the volume controls on this. I normally just use the high pass and the low pass. I use the gate, I use the compressor, I use the EQ, I leave the harmonic distortion and the analog as it is stock, and that's it. Voila, ba-bam. You got a really, really nice sound. I feel like this brings out some really, really good detail in your voice, and it's super simple to set up. I mean, it does look very confusing. It's a very weird layout. Normally, I don't know, it's just a strange layout the way they have it. So when I first downloaded this plugin, I was kind of like, what is this? It took me a minute to figure out what was what, because it's a lot different than any other plugin I've used before. as far as the layout goes. It just looks a little confusing, but it's actually quite simple once you know which row is what. So anyways, I really like this thing. If you can get it on sale for the 40 bucks, it is totally worth it. This will make your voice sound great. And then I go into the Waves WLM Plus loudness meter true peak limiter, and then I just turn this up here until I get to the end to where I'm actually loud enough, which I'm not really going to do right now because that's going to make me a lot louder. I'm not going to do that until I finalize the video. But when it's all said and done, I use that limiter to adjust myself to the correct volume. And between those two plugins, you pretty much have everything you need to get a really amazing voiceover sound. I will put a link in the video's description to where you can get the limiter and the Brainworx BX end console. So check out the video's description, or actually I'll throw it in the pinned comment as well. But I think that's going to wrap this video up. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I really love these two plugins. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you drop down the video's description, you'll find my Discord server, my YouTube channel, some ways to help support the channel, and don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. That would really help me out big time. At least do that and check out the pinned comment. All right, catch you guys later. Have an awesome day. Lightning out. See ya.